Hi Amber, how you doing? Okay, first thing I want to do is I want to address your question regarding the blurring and pixelization and the JPEG compression. Now, JPEG is a file format that does some pretty serious compression, really reduces the file size. So I think that is probably a byproduct of the compression being done by the JPEG format. Now, depending on how you saved it, depending on how big the file size is, a high quality JPEG will usually yield pretty darn good results. So I'm not real sure how you had your JPEG settings, your compression settings, but as long as you select high quality JPEG, you should be all right. Okay, let's go and jump over to your compositions. I think the main thing I'm seeing in the compositions as a group is that they're somewhat lacking in contrast. So there's not a whole lot of variation between the darkest darks and the lightest lights. So the tonal distribution could be I think a little deeper and indicating a higher sense of, a greater contrast in the composition. Maybe darken these up a little bit right here, the legs. And maybe some of this background area, this gradient maybe a little bit darker. And that's really going to come through when you add color here to these compositions. So we'll keep that in mind. Okay, I think this is really interesting right here. I think this one's interesting as well. Maybe this one might be a little more interesting. I think that this composition here is really interesting because of the difference, the variety of sizes and scale differences is very interesting here. Also the fact that you're really doing some neat things with the negative space associated with this composition. This composition, I think, is interesting because there's not as much scale variation as there is over here. But each of these is kind of facing a different direction. And I think that adds a lot of interest to the rotation associated with each of these objects is very interesting, or the sea turtles. So I think a combination of these two might yield the best results in that you've got both scale differences and rotation. So that would add a greater emphasis of variety in the composition. This, I think, is really lacking in variety because each of the shapes is relatively the same size. The same thing here, except for with the exception of the one large one. Okay, so I think one thing you're pushing too far is the blur associated with depth. So typically, the blur means that basically you're losing detail in something that is further from the vantage point than something that's closer. And you can see that if you just simply look out your window and look at a tree that's right in front of your window and compare it to the way the tree across the street looks. And you can see that tree across the street doesn't have as much detail. It's not necessarily that it's blurry, but that's just a descriptive word that we place on the lack of detail for things that are far from the focal perspective. So I think that you're blurring too much in the background. I really do. Like that's really, really over blurred. And it almost looks like a mistake. So other than that, I think that the compositions have a really good start. Please feel free to move forward with the composition that you think has the most potential. But at this point, I think you want to start determining how and where you're going to add typography. And that to a degree could spark some changes in the compositions themselves. So think about that. And I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. But right now you want to start thinking about where you're going to place your typography. And don't forget, this is a poster that's related that should be promoting an event that's relevant to your field of study. So think about how you're going to pursue that. All right. Very good work. Thank you. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks.